Gentlemen. The closer the Chicago Bulls get to the February 8 NBA trade deadline, the less likely it seems that we're going to do anything. And we need to do something. Now, there's now a non-zero chance this front office simply stands pat, as it did at the last two deadlines. And Bleacher Report has given us a quick rundown of what they think is going to happen. Now, if you think about a month or two ago, an inactive deadline would have felt like a nightmare scenario. Think about that. And here we are, doing absolutely nothing. Do you remember when AK first came in and was making changes left, right, and center? Everywhere. New players, old players, contracts. It was a hive of activity. And here we are this year. It's critical we make some changes, and we're doing absolutely nothing. Now, we don't know what goes on behind the scenes. I get that. But the trade market for Zach seems like it doesn't exist. And the front office willingness to do anything else with anyone else seems non-existent. And the Bulls have been just competitive enough to convince the front office to not tear everything down, and not really competitive enough. Not really competitive enough. I got it out eventually. To really warrant sacrificing the young core to tip them over the edge to get into a playoff position. So really, will Chicago really let another deadline pass without making a deal? So what are our assets? Now, attempting to discuss Chicago's asset collection is tricky because you don't really know from which side of the coin you should approach. The word asset can mean a number of different things depending on whether a team is buying or selling. Now, if the Bulls plan on chasing any players this trade season, they don't have a lot to offer. We owe a 2025 first round pick to the Spurs, but it carries protections through 2027, so they can only offer a first round pick 2 years after they send one to San Antonio. They could swap first in 24, 28, 29, or 30 though. 2030 seems like such a long way away. We are also owed an upcoming first rounder from the Portland Trail Blazers, but it's lottery protected and keeps that protection all the way until 2028. Portland's rebuild could conceivably take long enough that that protection activates every season, and the Blazers wind up only sending their 2028 second rounder. Devastating. In terms of young talent, Chicago doesn't have a lot to offer, unless it has an appetite to let go of someone like Pat Will or Ayo, but Kobe is clearly a keeper, and we saw that again last night against the Hornets, and arguably already the most important player in the organization. Now, the game last night was one of the first games I watched in a long time, and Kobe is incredible. He's come such a long way this year, and he's passionate, he's going left, he's going right, he's dunking, he's shooting, he's leading, and we need to start surrounding this kid with a team that actually gives a shit, not an aging, war-torn, beat-up bunch of dudes. Now, but if the Bulls opted to sell their veterans for long-term assets, they have plenty to shop around. Levine, obviously number one, but his market seems pretty poor due to the size of his shitty contract, early in his shitty contract, and his injury issues. But DeRozan and his expiring $28 million salary would surely interest any offense-needy shoppers. Now, the problem I see with DeRozan, though, is he's not adapting to the modern game. He's not changing his game at all. It's the same ISO, post-up, mid-range jumper. And it becomes a point where it just becomes stale. And if I'm on that team watching DeRozan in the post, you might as well just walk away because you know exactly what's going to happen. And If the Bulls ever made Caruso available, he'd have contenders lined up like a Black Friday shopper. But I don't think they're willing to let Caruso go. But if they want to rebuild a new core, they almost have to dig in with Caruso long term, and grab some assets while he's hot, or ride him out for the next 15 years. Again, really assessing what Chicago needs requires really knowing what they want to do. And the wish list when loading up for a stretch run or taking a step back now for the possibility of multiple forward steps in the future are two wildly different things. Now, if it was up to me, I'd be clearing out the veterans and seeking out some picks and some younger dudes to put around Kobe and really build the core off around him. Now, this is a crazy stat. So, 2+ seasons, DeRozan, Levine, and Vooch have posted a minus 2.8 net rating. Minus. How much more data do the decision makers need to see before accepting that this trio just isn't working? So, what are we going to see? The predictions are that we should be really buzzing with trade talk at the moment, but nothing's happening. And that's very frustrating. They've built this roster as a win now roster, and it doesn't work. And you'd think that that might guarantee a big shakeup, but nothing's happening. Nothing is happening. So really it becomes a case that we might just be stuck with what we have and dealing with that until the unforeseeable future, which may be the end of this year or the end of next year. Who really knows? But I would have assumed that with Vooch, DeRozan, Zach, maybe Pat will, we would have been making some moves, but here we are approaching the trade deadline and absolutely nothing has happened.